Thank you very much, Marc-Henri. Thanks to the University of Kyoto for its invitation. It's good. Thanks to its smart fellows, which organize this very pertinent, very interesting symposium, and it's an honor for me to be with you today. Here is the United Nations Agenda for the Sustainable Development. As you can see, the objectives are numerous and ambitious. 17, probably too numerous and too ambitious. The eradication of poverty, the strengthening of care and education, the fight against global warming, the preservation of biodiversity, and so on. It's only a shopping list. We find in this program the three pillars of sustainable development: the social pillar, the economic pillar, and the ecological pillar. Simply, we don't really know how these three pillars are connected and comfort each other. There is a lack of strategy, in other words, a lack of prioritization of objectives because there is a lack of method. I will tell you a story for children, a story from Czechoslovakia, the story of the Caye, 100 times as good. This is the story of two friends, a cat and a dog, who, to celebrate their birthday, decide to make the best cake in the world. And how to make the best cake when you don't have a cooking recipe, when you don't really know what to do? Well, we mix everything we love, all the most precious foods, for example, fugu, beef of Kobe, caviar, oyster, and so on. The game becomes very expensive and not so good. The policy for sustainable development is a bit like this collection of good intentions whose condition of realization are unclear. We need method. And the first question of method is to distinguish clearly the sustainable development from ecology, whereas people tend to confuse them. This difference is not obvious. Our first point, what is ecology? Ecology is a science. A science is together a method and some specific objects of problems. Ecology is a biological science, but its methodology is a comprehensive, synthetic, global approach of the life of every kind of life, while the approach of biology is analytical. And this comprehensive science deals with 5 main questions. First question, the biodiversity and its loss. Second question, the depletion of soil and natural resources. Third, the soil, air, and water toxication. The fourth question, the health problems issued from pollution. And the last, not the least, the global warming. Sustainable development, for its part, is not ecology stricto sensu. It doesn't deal directly with these 5 great problems, but it treats the factors of production, capital, labor, technology, as these are subjected to the constraint of the ecological problems, and it treats them by making the production not the cause of these problems, but one of the keys to their resolution. Sustainable development as such is not a question of biologists, botanists, geologists, or geographer, oceanographer, but is essentially a matter for the economist. In the French expression, développement durable or long-lasting development, we must take seriously the notion of durable, of duration of time, the question of long term, of the duration and its building. Reflecting on sustainable development led us to wonder what is the time test capital, the time test labor, and the time test technology. In other words, the capital, the labor, and the technology under the guise of time. Or also, what is time doing to capital, to labor, to technology? We must think the long-lasting development from the sense of time, and from the time building, and not from the material processing, nor from the evolution of social and economic trends, with, for result, the transformation of the production system. So, time, for example, transforms capital in heritage of patrimony. Time transforms the labor in maintenance. Time transforms technology in art of boundaries. Today, it is the time and the duration and not the matter which is revolutionary. I begin the first point. Time transforms capital in heritage of patrimony. For the banker, patrimony is the same thing than the capital. Simply, one is a term, the capital, used by the economic science, the other, the patrimony, by legal science. One, capital, is linked to the short term, while the other implies a little more a long-term idea. The capital has for purpose its own increase, while the patrimony is first, for using the words of the jurist and not of the economist, I quote the jurist, I quote the legal theory, capital assigned to a mission. That this mission is simply the maintenance and preservation of the life of its holder. It is the banker patrimony, the private patrimony, the capital, or else fulfills a public service mission, like public domain or public goods, or in last seeks its full transmission to the whole of humanity because of its intrinsic value, what defines the common heritage of humanity. Patrimony of the banker, public domain or common heritage of humanity, it is each time the same legal notion that is at work. In short, heritage or patrimony, whatever it may be, it's an institutionalized capital, an institutionalization that puts capital in the service of projects that can be prolonged in the long term. Second point, what is the time doing to the labor? Usually, when we talk about labor, we talk about productive labor. In any case, employment and paid work. But work is also a whole series of daily activities that are unpaid, activities without job, but also without which life would become unbearable. Cooking, raising children, but also praying, spiritual exercise, and so on. This kind of work is fundamental. it ensures the preservation of life and even better, its transmission. This is not directly the productive part of life, but this part is the condition of the reproduction of life from which man is able to produce. The ethic of care shows that the therapeutic treatment is improved by the intention and benevolence that the care staff provides to the patient. Jan Toronto, an important scholar in gender studies, shows in her book Moral Boundaries a political argument for an ethic of care, shows that the Industrial Revolution has increased the role of productive labor at the expense of conservation and transmission work, so that it has been accompanied, at least in the West, by the devaluation of the role of the women. This point is very important for a big reason. People think that the multiplication of robots, the automation of production will lead to unemployment. I don't think so. Quite the contrary. Indeed, the more productive tasks are automated, the more we need to ensure the conservation, reproduction, and transmission of the condition of life for guaranteeing the maintenance of the productive system. That's why I'm talking about duplication of work. Every productive task must be accompanied by a reproductive and conservative task. In France, there is a legal theory called the theory of compensation, according to which the real estate developer must finance in compensation landscape conservation operation in proportion to what his real estate program has destroyed. So there is effectively duplication of work. Duplication means here two things. There is twice as much work, but also the work reflects on itself. A work that reflects on itself, on its own consequence for society and its environment, is human work, properly human work foreign to the animal behavior. The work is a garden. It must be constantly maintained, less to exploit it than to contribute to the beauty of life. By making the world a garden, we also make it a polder. That is to say, a protection, a dike, an ark that protects us from the violence of externality. Externality that is nothing but our own violence that comes back against us in an unpredictable and uncontrollable form. Last point, technique or technology in gas of time. The technique involves exactly the same kind of problem as the labor. When we talk about work, we think exclusively about productive work. In the same way, when we talk about technique, we mainly have in mind the productive techniques, properly said, the technology. Yet, when we read and when we write, we realize that the know-how that we implement on this occasion goes far beyond the simple productive framework to concern a much deeper and much interior relationship to our way of living in the world. We call that without reading and without writing, we will remain an hunter-gatherer society. Before being productive, the technical knowledge, according to the famous French paleontologist André Leroi-Gourhan, constitute, I quote, the protective cover which man managed all around him, or a kind of membrane which filters the relation of man between his interiority and his exteriority, between his power of living and the world. That this cover takes today the form of this waste for production, that man feels the need to increase his technical prostheses in order to protect himself, shows that his fear of the exteriority have not decreased since the Savage Ages and the invention of fire. There is a definition of the technique given to us by a very old philosopher, one of the last great ancient philosophers, a Neoplatonic philosopher of the end of the ancient world, Proclus. Neoplatonism is a philosophy of production. I mean, a philosophy who defines itself as production, deployment, diffusion, and dispensation of being. But it's also a philosophy that is aware that any production, any diffusion of being is likely to be paid at the cost of exhaustion, dispersion, and disappearance, that Greeks call skedasis. You see, men have not waited for the Anthropocene and ecology to ask this kind of question. It is in this context that Proclus defines the task of technology as that which limits or gives boundaries to the self-possession of being, of nature, which limits it and not that which transforms it or which intensifies it. Let us be clear. To limit here, to give boundaries doesn't mean to stop or to freeze the movement of the being, but to arrange, to measure, to order, to rhythm, to regulate intervals for structuring the deployment of the being so that this one doesn't turn to the chaos. Technique, as the art of the boundaries, is precisely what makes it the protective cover of which Leroi-Gourhan speaks. By measuring, by ordering, by putting in rhythm the world, techniques produce time as well as things, so that we can realize a long-lasting development. Unfortunately, I don't believe that we give ourselves all the intellectual and political means to set in, to install our productive system in the long term. And for me, it's again an epistemological question. Indeed, the real problem is not the scientific and technological progress, but the inadequacy of the recent trends of the social and political sciences for the sustainable development. Our political, legal, and administrative system, in its very recent trends, I specify, conflicts with the long-lasting development because it is determined by short-term consideration. To consider the best way of government according to its ability to build time and duration, it's a big matter for the building of the survivability studies themselves. Thank you for your listening.